Welcome to I Change the Narrative, a podcast for and about Black men, inspiring, supporting, and empowering Black men and Black boys. Today's guests will be sharing their expertise on how to resuscitate the relationships that may be looked upon as sabotage or toxic. Before we start the conversation, I want our guests to tell us about yourself and the work that you're involved in that lends itself to the topic or the lived experience. We're going to first off start with Troy.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me. So my name is Troy Spry. I am a certified dating and relationship coach, a speaker, and author of the book Teach Me How to Love While What You Don't Know Will Hurt You. But I call myself a relationship enthusiast of all things. And so that's what I do. So I've had literally a large amount of experience with toxic relationships, self-sabotaging, all the things that we're going to talk about today. And I'm excited to be on the show. Thank you.
No problem. Michael.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Michael Dangerfield. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a national certified counselor. Own a private practice where I specialize with working with men and couples in therapy. And so, I'm very committed to this work. It started off with me having to do this work for myself, my family, and, just life challenges in terms of relationships. Also, author, I have a few books, kind of a bio, Identity Crisis Averted, which is kind of my story and how I kind of came into doing this work. And then a couple of journals, one for men, Reflections of a Man, a guided memento, and then Reflections of a Woman, Questions from a Man. So I'm really invested in this work, and I like to, support those who are really trying to better themselves first so that they can be the best version in their relationships.
Awesome. Words and wisdom change outcomes. So I thank you for being a part of that today. This episode of I Change the Narrative is sponsored by So Organic So Suave, also known as Sauce. Sauce is a luxury hair care and skincare refuge for those with thick hair and melanin-rich skin, from healthy beard growth to top-of-head hairstyling to an illuminating skincare regimen. Sauce Essentials will naturally enhance your outer appearance to strengthen your inner confidence. Sauce invites you to accept the authenticity in real self-care and embrace your best. You can find Sauce's award-winning grooming essentials online at sossd.co. Again, that's sossd.co. You can also follow Sauce on Instagram and for the latest in product news and updates at sossd.co. Elevate your grooming with Sauce today. In healthy relationships, everything just kind of works. Sure, we might disagree from time to time or come upon other challenges along the way, but you generally agree or disagree or agree to disagree, and you move on from that. And you can usually openly discuss any problems that arise. However, on the other hand, there are some cases in which relationships with this person or persons turns difficult, then turning into toxicity. I said that wrong, but you all know what I mean.
Right.
We all have toxic people in our lives who can't be avoided, whether it be parents, parents-in-law, siblings or sibling spouses, a friend or friends. And also we are learning that some of our coworkers can even be or be in that category. So I wanted to ask you guys, define for me or define for us what a toxic relationship is.
Ooh. You want to jump on that one first, Troy? Or you want me to kind of...
I'll jump in. Okay. So what comes up for me when I hear the word toxic is poisonous, right? And when I think poisonous to your well-being. So when a relationship starts to become poisonous to your well-being, then I think it's considered at that level of toxic, right? So that's what comes up for me in terms of definition, if I tried to keep it as simple as possible. I'm sure Michael has a bigger definition.
No, I actually love what you said. And I will just add to what you said. The confusion comes in with toxic relationships or toxicity. I struggle with that too, Nika. is the idea of our frame of reference, right? So if you never really had a healthy relationship or understand what healthy relationship dynamics look like, then it's easy for you to say that you're being toxic. You are not allowing me to be the best version of myself. And so that's why it's a word that's thrown out there a lot, but you got to get to the core of what is a healthy relationship before you say what's toxic. So.
Okay.
I love what you said there real quick. Is the fact that some people overuse this word. They abuse this word, frankly, because people will call you toxic just because you disagree with them.
Exactly.
Right. So we gotta be real clear about what it means for sure. So thanks for that question.
Yeah.
So what is the makeup then of a toxic relationship? Like let's really because Troy, you said we definitely misuse this word and overuse it. So what are the qualities of a toxic person?
So from my perspective, it's important to understand what the context of the relationship is first and foremost, right? But generally speaking, a relationship involves more than one person who's coming together with kind of a shared, for the most part, shared perspective or trying to get in one accord or whatever the case is. So for two people who are individuals to come together and be able to agree, there has to be this sense of a healthy understanding of self, right? Because if you don't really know who you are, what you believe, what you think, what you want, and then you're coming to another person in a relationship expecting them to feel that, there's always going to be this conflict. So healthy is individual qualities, being good with yourself. If there's some perhaps unresolved childhood trauma or some type of baggage that you have not necessarily dealt with, you really have to have at least started that process if you expect to connect with anybody in any relationship healthily, right? Because if you haven't, they can easily trigger you and you'll think it's them, but perhaps it's some things that you've not resolved, and vice versa, you with the other person as well. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think one of the things that comes up for me when I think about toxic relationships is abuse. Number one, right? So any form of abuse, I think we have to unpack that and say, why is it something that I'm suscepting myself to,
right.
And what is it about what I saw, or what is it about what I've experienced in my life that makes that okay, or even makes me crave it?
Right.
Because there's this group of people out there who crave toxicity because that's all they've ever known. It's their comfort zone. So until, like Michael said, until you change your position on what healthy is, then toxic will be good to you.
Right.
So some people, as they heal and as they grow, they start to realize that what they did before doesn't serve them now. But the people that never heal and grow, they just continue the cycle of the same types of toxic relationships. So that's what comes up for me.
Great point, Troy. Nika, if you don't mind, I just like healthy can be viewed as toxic to some people who have normalized toxic behavior, and I think that is a complex idea. It's kind of like when people say, "I'm trying to protect my peace," like I'm trying to protect my peace, but then I'm questioning what really is at the core of your peace. Because if your peace is drama, your peace is like this deficit mindset, then anytime somebody's coming to you with something open, they're against you. You're gonna be like, no,
that's true.
You're toxic. So
oh yeah, that's a great point.
Absolutely. Are there any warning signs for toxicity?
Let me think what comes up for me. What comes up for me is selfishness, right? So extreme selfishness, I think, turns into toxicity. Lack of accountability. Like, to me, that is a recipe for one-sided relationships. And so even when they are toxic, the other person can't even see it. They don't even realize. That's when you get gaslit. That's when you get deflection. That's when you get dismissed. So I always tell people that I talk to, like, the one thing you need to look for is the ability to take accountability. If you have to look for anything else, is the ability to take accountability. And then the second thing is a growth mindset. If there's a person that you're dealing with that can't do either one of those things, I feel like those are the building blocks for a toxic relationship right from the beginning. So that's what comes up for me.
Yeah, and I agree with those. Like accountability is huge, and I would also add that uh, uh, some of the triggers or warning signs for toxicity in a relationship could be this rigid view of what's needed in a relationship. So if somebody approaches you and says, "In order to be connected with me, I expect this, I demand this, X, Y, Z," then perhaps like, hey, what's your definition of relationship, right? And then sometimes just people having unrealistic expectations, of others off top. It doesn't take a long time with dealing with anybody, whether in a workplace or relationship or whatever, to see, what people are expecting and how they move. And that goes, along the lines of kind of what Troy was saying with some of the selfishness that people just kind of present with.
Mm.
If we're aware, if we're paying attention, we can see some of those signs early.
Right.
But Michael, but the thing is, we don't pay attention because we get blinded by lust, right? And so that's what happens is we fall for someone, and then we fall for the things they do, right? And I
Yep.
think that's why we have to stay like very. You have to be able to think with both sides of your. You have to be able to think with your emotional. What think with your emotion, feel your emotions, but
Right.
think with your brain
Be
as well.
rational. Right.
Be
Right.
rational about what's going on in front of you, because you know what happens. People, it's a year in, and they're like, I never saw any of these signs, and I'm like,
They were all there.
every
I
one of them was
guarantee you.
there. Yeah, but you were
Yes.
just caught up. You was caught up in the emotions of it, and so now the emotions have settled down, and now you see the real person for who they really are, and you're like, oh, like what happened here? They lied to me, and I'm like, no, they didn't lie to you. You just didn't
Oh,
see them.
man. And,
Wow.
and then the world we live in with technology doesn't help, Troy and Nika,
Mm,
because what happens, especially with social media, is you see the best versions, you see the edits of all the good stuff, right? And
mm-hmm.
then so this comparison thing is natural and it's unhealthy. You're looking at this and this is healthy. This is you start to frame yourself around the best versions of things, and when you don't get that, or when it starts off that way, and then the stardust falls off, right? The honey falls off the moon, or whatever the case is, then you're left with reality and not these unrealistic expectations. Then you have to do something with that. And so, man, we can talk that all day.
Right.
Absolutely.
Troy, I want to take it back. You said gaslighting. Some of our viewers may not know what that is. What does that define that for us, please?
Yeah. So what comes like the definition to me is, and I think it's the definition is, it's when someone tries to distort your reality.
Mm,
Right. So in simple terms, something happens, you know it happened, but they tell you it didn't happen,
hmm
and they stand on that. Right.
hmm
That's the most simplified definition. I'm sure Michael probably has a more therapeutic definition of it, but to me,
Yeah,
it's just when someone tries to distort your reality.
yeah. That is absolutely at the core of what it's all about. And my goal in this informal place is to not come across very therapeutic because
Mm-hmm.
I want people to get this. But you're right. The idea of someone taking perhaps what you observe and what you see and what you perceive to be something and kind of twist it or manipulate it to be self-serving for them or to make you feel like um, you're crazy or whatever the case is. So yeah,
hmm
that is
Again,
also though one of those terms that is overused.
that's what I was about
You
to
know,
say. It's
Yes.
one of the
yeah.
overuse. What it was the word of the year last year. Remember? Did y'all
Yes.
see that? It's like
I didn't
the
see that,
most
but
used
that
word of
makes
the
sense.
year. Gaslit.
Probably, and then probably narcissist or narcissism is somewhere up there as well because
Oh yeah, those three terms was all the words of the year: gaslit, toxic, and narcissist.
Yes.
Everybody's a narcissist. Everybody that doesn't agree with you is a narcissist. Everybody that doesn't agree with you, they're gaslighting you.
hmm
It's just it's getting bad.
it is.
Absolutely. It is getting very bad. What should we do if we notice that we are dealing with someone who is toxic? And I'm of course I'm talking about not just talking about those that are in a relationship. I'm in a romantic relationship, let me say that. I'm talking about with family, I'm talking about with friends, I'm talking about with our coworkers. How do we deal with that?
Go ahead and take
But
that
one,
one, Michael.
yeah. So in the therapeutic space, one of the things I really work hard to some degree with all my clients, individuals, couples, etc., is this idea of focusing on controlling the things that you can control, right? And so my logic behind that is the only control you really can have is over yourself, and it's over two buckets of things. It's your outlook, like what you think, what you perceive, what you feel, how you reason, and then your output, which is what you say and what you do in response to those things. So if you're controlling the things that you can control, and other people and what they think and what they do is outside of your control, then you have to use what you have access to and try to approach it that way. So if you recognize somebody's being toxic, they're gaslighting you, they're making you to be the blame for whatever is not working in a relationship or whatever, the power that you do have is to, one, perhaps assess what they're saying, be willing to acknowledge if there is some truth to it, and know that all things are usually not true that somebody perceives about you, but then be vocal yourself about perhaps what you agree with, disagree with, and what you feel. If it is a relationship, you should feel comfortable enough to say what it is that you feel, and know that the power that you have for yourself is the same power that they have for themselves. And if there's no dialogue, then that's going to be wasted energy if you're trying to force them to change or force them to do whatever. So nobody's going to do something that they don't really want to do themselves. And so sometimes that means exit stage left. Just got exit stage left and be okay with it.
Yes.
Agreed, 100%. I mean, I don't think there's much else that needs to be said. I think the ultimate thing that people struggle with is removing themselves, because they hope, right? They base their decisions off of hope that someone is going to change. Meanwhile, the person is taking no steps.
Yeah.
Especially if they can't even acknowledge, right? If a person can't even acknowledge their behaviors and they have enough self-awareness to do that, then there's no fixing anything. What does that look like? So that looks like you putting all this work in, you having the same conversations over and over again, and hoping that something's going to change, and then being afraid to remove yourself. So at some point, you have to actually blame yourself if that's what you continue to allow into your life. Because I think what people struggle with the most is creating real boundaries. I think we have a lot of fake boundaries. I think people
absolutely
people
moving targets.
That's it. It's like the boundary moves based off who the person is in the situation. But is that really a boundary though? About not what you want to allow. So I think we have a lot of that.
And these dotted line boundaries, to go along with what you're saying, Troy, the ones that can be easily erased and moved instead of these solid boundaries, that's a tough thing for society today. Unrealistic expectations, and then perhaps not having our own boundaries. It's a challenge.
I hear everything that you're saying, but I think the hardest thing is for some is removing yourself, walking away, because especially when it becomes a friend that you've had for over 25 years, especially when this family member is, blood, that's the part that really hurts, I think, many of us, where it makes it hard for us to walk away. But that's what we have to do in order to keep ourselves mentally somewhat together, and to keep us, moving forward with our own lives. So
let me add something to what you said, Nika, because you make a great point. Sometimes it's not even walking away. Sometimes it's stepping away, creating some space and being able to be a nice distance away, perhaps where you can be protected by your boundary. Because if it feels different, right? When it's blood, when it's biological, it's almost like you have a connection to these people, not by choice, by force. Like, you were born into this, right? And people like to say blood is thicker than water. At the same time, though, to Troy's point, if people are not willing to do the work for themselves and acknowledge things, then we like to say the definition of insanity is, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Well, you can't change them. And so this is family. You can step away, and perhaps when they do that work, make yourself still accessible. You're not so far away that you've created a disconnect, but you also can't be sucked into the vortex of whatever they got going on. So you have to be able to be okay with taking a step away, a distance, some separation, and saying perhaps, hey, I love you, you family, like I'm here to be a support, but I'm not going to allow myself to lose myself in the process of you doing whatever it is you're doing, especially if you're not trying to do the work for yourself. That's a tough thing, especially for some cultures perhaps got that down, but many cultures, especially ones that look like us, we really struggle with
it.
So we struggle with that.
So the word that comes up for me as well is acceptance. At some point, you have to accept that person for who they are and then navigate accordingly. Yeah. And so you may not, if you're in a tough situation and they're being who they already are, who they've proven themselves to be, the struggle comes in is when you expect different from them. So the gap is between acceptance and expectation. And so at some point, when I go back to, it's on you. At some point, it's you that has to make a decision. It's not their ability to change. It's you on what you will and won't allow. And that's the part we struggle. We all struggle with it. I've struggled with it before too. But I tell you, it feels so much better when you actually, put the real boundaries in place. It feels your life is so much better. It's so much more peaceful. And people respect you a different way when you stick to what it is that you said you were going to do.
Mm-hmm. Right. I want to tag you right there, and Nika, please, share me up if you need to.
No, go for it.
Because that was a powerful thought you shared, Troy. The difference between acceptance and expectance or expectation. That's huge. Along the same lines, we have to get to a place to where we accept ourselves, because the only way that we can be sucked into these moving targets and moving boundaries from someone else is if we don't have peace with where we are. Think about it from this perspective. If someone asks you to do something and you say yes, that's the end of the conversation. You do it, you show up. Someone asks you to do something and you say no, what typically happens? Well, why? What? So you really, and then perhaps you find yourself trying to posture or creating up, false reasons why you can't show up and do something. It's not because, they really have that much power over you, but it's really because you haven't accepted the fact that you can't say no and be okay with that. And so people who are not used to hearing no, and know that you perhaps have not set those boundaries up for yourself will win every time, because they'll give you this guilt trip. And then before you know it, you'll be compelled to do whatever it is. And that's where the acceptance for self and the boundaries for self have to come into play. If yes is okay, but no is a problem, and yes and no are two very valid responses to anything, then the issue is not perhaps all the time with the other person. The issue sometimes is with us and being okay with saying, I can't, I'm not going to be able to do it. It's because I don't want to, or for whatever reason, right? So.
That's powerful.
Yeah. For the individual who is actually toxic and maybe at a point of reflection where I need my people, I need my family, I need my community back. Is it possible to fix me if I am toxic? Is it possible?
Absolutely.
So.
Because don't forget, we're dealing with years of this. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible. Change is possible if we have acceptance and we have acknowledgement, and then we're willing to inquire about new behaviors to get a different outcome. That's change is always possible if you're willing to do that. But the question is, who's willing to do that? Because the first step is the acceptance piece. I got to accept that I have an issue, that I'm driving away all the people in my life. Why is that? What is it? So I got two options. I can look at myself, or I can blame everybody else. But if 10 people are gone and I'm still stuck here, what does that mean? It's probably not me. It's probably not them. It's probably me. But but we have shame when it comes to looking at ourselves. We create this. It becomes shameful. Like, self-reflection doesn't have to be shameful.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. It's actually the most empowering thing I think I've ever done, is actually look at myself and say, dang, why do I respond the way to this? Why do I do this? Why do I do these things? What is it that impacts me as a person? That is the most empowering thing I think I've ever done.
That's at the core of not just healthy relationships, but a healthy individual being able to take a look at yourself, but be honest about it. Because you can take a look at yourself and then justify why things are not working out the way that you want them to work out, and everybody else will be the reason, right? The 10 people that are gone, well, I didn't need them anyway because they were the reason, right? Until you finally deal with yourself. So that acknowledgement, and that acceptance, those are huge things. But then, Nika, to your point,
Mhm.
who's going to really say that I'm a toxic person, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's important, that sometimes for people to really, like get to a place to where they can do their work, perhaps it can't be the people that are around them because perhaps they haven't really done the work themselves. Some things need a certain approach. Some
Right.
things need if you really want to help somebody, you know, a person who's not willing or struggling with acknowledging who they really are, it needs an approach, right? It needs an approach that's um, educated and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've also found though that the more vulnerable you can become with other people about your own flaws and your own self-reflection, your own journey, then it opens doors for them to really look at themselves, right? Because all we're trying to do ultimately is protect ourselves. That's
Mm-hmm.
why vulnerability is so hard,
Right.
Right.
right? So I've learned that even with people around me, that the more I can admit that I've got things that I've been working on, then the more they kind of open up to me about things that they probably need to work on. I'm not saying that works all the time. What I am saying though is sometimes we got to be vulnerable enough to say that I'm
Right.
not perfect either.
Right. And,
Right.
and and the reason that works, Troy, is because at the core of you doing that work for yourself is acceptance. So that whether they accept it or not, you know, the benefit is that you're good and perhaps they have, some awareness and now they can do some work comfortably. But if you're not good with if you are saying, I will be vulnerable with you because I'm expecting you to be vulnerable with me,
Mm-hmm.
that's where we go wrong because you
Mm-hmm.
have someone who's like I'm willing to do this work and I'm willing to expose myself, but then perhaps the other person doesn't and it uses that against them, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where it's nope, never again. And
That's when the
men,
shutdown happens.
yeah, men have that hard because we don't learn, as boys early on that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's you hold that inside and then you use it on the field or in the game or to
Mm-hmm.
dominate the opponents. But then you grow up and you're expected to be this healthy person and healthy being in a relationship, whether that's with your peers or romantically, and you don't know how to do that. And then it's
Mm-hmm.
like, all these expectations are coming. Oh, why you don't do this? Why you don't do that? Why And it's like, why?
It's
plus, I got my guards up. I don't know how,
uh-huh.
and I got my guards up naturally. So,
I
It's like
wish.
we're expecting. It's like I'm gonna say this one little thing is that it's like we're expected to be in relationships without knowing how to be relational, right? Like
I like that.
we're not even being taught how to be relational, and so I've seen this happen a lot with like middle-aged men where like women are starting to ask for more from them emotionally, and they really don't have it to give. They don't even know how to navigate that space, but that person will be seen as toxic by that woman sometimes, right? Because she's like, "Well, you're a toxic person. You don't have any emotions." And
that's,
I'm like,
that's
that's not
true.
really the case, though. But he's got to explore that in order to be better for her. I think
Yeah,
that's just something I wanted to add on there.
Well,
yeah, yeah.
you brought up that men do not know how to be relational. Um, so how do we help our young boys, our young Black boys? Where do we begin with that? Where does that conversation? How does that conversation even start?
Mm,
Well, it starts, ideally it starts in a family context. A young boy is in a home with, a two-parent home and it's healthy and there's open communication and dialogue. That's the best, conduit for him to grow up and be healthy. Unfortunately, that's not our reality a lot of times. And so depending on if it's, the dad or the mom or whoever's responsible for, kind of pouring into that boy, it's important to not let these societal norms and the stigma, be the metric by which we raise our children. It's got to be okay for a boy to express all the God given feelings that he has. It's got to be equally okay to cry if you need to cry, as it is to to be angry when you feel angry. It can't be that this is acceptable behavior for you, but this is not, because at some point in time, that experience and the knowledge of those feelings and emotions which are there has to be able to be explored and appropriated if he's going to grow up and be able to be healthy in a relationship and be able to be healthy with children and all those things, and kind of break those generational curses and those societal norms. So conversation, dialogue, and a space to be able to do that without punishment or without denigration or making him feel bad for expressing those emotions.
That's
I
a fact.
agree. Yeah. But I do want to say that outside of the family, I think that where we can start teaching our young boys, our young men to be relational is on the field.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I really do, because that is where a lot of teaching takes place. A lot of those behaviors are learned. So I don't know.
Agreed.
That's something to think about,
That means that the coach has to be available to do it, though.
Yes.
All right. So one thing I feel like we don't do, and I just now as an adult started to figure this out, is like we don't even share the range of emotions with boys.
Nope.
Like there's two of them: it's sadness and it's anger.
Right.
And that's it. There's nothing. There's no space for in between. So we can't even name the emotion.
Right.
We
Emotional intelligence is low for sure.
That's it. So like, how do we teach that? I think that's what we're trying to get to. Like, fathers. I think mothers can play a role in it too, though.
Absolutely.
They can play a role in teaching these same things, like actually practically saying, all right, in this moment you feel what? And then helping them define what that emotion is versus just saying, stop crying.
Yeah, be a man as a boy who,
Right.
is hurt and wants to cry. Yeah, and there, believe it or not, there's a lot of that work that's going on. I know I've had an opportunity to connect with different colleges and universities to do that work, with teams. And there's even groups of, like professional sports teams have, contracted providers. So it's happening, but this awareness of it is it's still kind of, under the table, because think about it, during the Olympics when you had Naomi Osaka and other people who bowled out of competitive sports at the highest level for mental health reasons, look at how they got criticized, right? And so the supports are in place, but this acceptance of it, societal acceptance, we got to do better, and part of that is just continuing to push the book.
Yeah, I agree. And we cannot let up. Like we are now pushing mental health and seeking therapy, seeking a therapist. We now have to push that, I think, within our community of Black boys and Black men, so that we can undo some of our brokenness. Not all of it's going to come together all at once. However, we just have to keep on pushing those buttons so that this can be a norm for us in our future. So thank you for that. Can our communities, families, exes rebound from dealing with these toxic people? How do we rebound from all of this?
I think this conversation we're having right now is part of the process, and it's along the lines of what we've been talking about. First, we have to be willing to recognize that this is what's been going on. Like a lot of what we've been doing, whether intentionally or unintentionally, is toxic. And perhaps we just some of that was just passed down to us, and we just did it ignorantly. So the more we have these conversations, the more we talk about it, and the more we are willing to take a hard look at ourselves and say, I need to do some work, then others around us may say, you know what, I need to do that work as well. Like, let's, be a little bit more compassionate with each other and supportive. And we do this work together. But if there's always the selective few who's doing the work, and it's disjointed and everybody else is like, no, this is the norm, then you have this struggle. So we can rebound, but we have to do it together. It has to be a multiple person lift or a 2-man lift, and do it that way, as opposed to just siloed. I do my work, Troy does his work, we talk to each other and support each other, but nobody else, who look like us and who's been, in some of the similar situations we have know about, how to overcome. So
Right. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. The rebound is possible. It's I'm not going to rehash what Michael said, but everything he said we can do. We just got to do it on even bigger scales too.
right.
Like reaching more people, like Michael does at colleges or whatever it is. There's bigger platforms. I think that's important. I think the other piece of this is this work has to be shared. People need to make this kind of work shareable. Right. So the stuff that gets shared is usually the stuff that is the most entertaining. It's the most and
Good
that
point.
is usually
Good
the
point.
most toxic stuff. That's
Good
usually the stuff like the fights and the
laughing my
debates.
pain, the comedy shows, that's
All
poking
that.
fun
That's
at
what
all
people
the
like, right?
Mhm.
Like people like that's entertainment for people. What if we normalized this kind of work being shareable work? I think that would be even more helpful.
Yeah. I want to just ask one more question. Troy, you said something earlier about shame, acknowledging the shame. Why is it so difficult for us to acknowledge our shame one-on-one?
One-on-one, because that's a very weak space. It makes you feel weak, even
Mm-hmm.
though it's actually a space of strength. But to be able to acknowledge that you are ashamed of something, because it opens up the door to judgment, and nobody
Absolutely.
really wants to be judged. I mean, people don't want to be seen in a light that's weak, and that actually ruins the space for connection,
Right.
because we don't want to show ourselves, we want to reveal ourselves, but yet we want intimacy. Like, how do you get? You really can't get both at the same time. If you're not, you can't connect if you're not vulnerable, and you can't be intimate if you're not open. So, I think that's why.
I think you said it earlier too, Troy. There's this innate and natural level of self protection and self preservation, right? And so, whenever you share something like shame, or you decide you're going to be really vulnerable, you really are opening up your heart, and you're at the mercy of the person who's there. Now, if that person is doing their work and they can protect your heart and approach it gingerly, that's great. Now you can do that one-on-one. Usually in the therapeutic space is a healthy place to do that, right? Because that's not exposed to everybody. But if you call yourself trying to, expose your shame, to a group of people who've not done that work, and the natural tendency is to take advantage of the vulnerable, and the weak, that's going to happen. And either you're going to have some resilience to be able to overcome that, or you're going to be crushed. And unfortunately, this world we live in, we see all these school shootings and this suicide and all this stuff. We don't have the capacity and the resilience yet, we're crushed. And so shame, guilt, all those emotions that people typically see as negative, which are not necessarily negative, they're feelings, we have to be able to discuss that and explore it in a space. Another, I guess, key word is, or a top word over the past years, is safe space. And so, we got to be careful of what we say is safe space, because, sometimes spaces are not safe, and we think they are. Look, and we expose ourselves in.
Let me tell you, social media is not your safe space.
Ooh, say that. Say that.
I cringe. I literally cringe when I see people in the spirit of transparency, like exploring themselves. You can tell they're exploring themselves, but it's on social media. And the comment sections, people are so insensitive. They don't have the capacity to receive that transparency. And we can say that it doesn't affect us, but it does. You can't tell me you got a comment section full of people telling you that you are weak or whatever it is, and you tell me you don't internalize that some. That's we lying to ourselves. So we got to stop doing therapy on social media. That's not effective at all. It's actually counterproductive to what you're trying to do.
Yeah. One of our listeners said you have to be careful who you open your heart to. That goes along perfect, Troy, with what you're saying. Because when you said that, when you brought up that example, I immediately went to how the culture has treated Tyrese, how the culture has even treated Kanye. Those dudes were crying. Kanye, in his way, is crying.
Right.
So, and we do not do a great job of supporting their feelings. We laugh at their feelings. So, yes, social media is not a safe space, like some of us want to think. that it is. So thank you for that. Gentlemen, this has been an awesome conversation, but it is our time and we've done just enough. So I thank you for that. Please tell our listeners how they can connect with you. We're going to start with Michael.
So you can find me on social media at m_danger the helper. You can find me Google Michael Dangerfield therapist or www.allin-therapy.com. And even on Amazon, if you're interested in some of the books that I talked about and want to do some of that work or seeing my story, and as Troy said, perhaps learning some of what you need to do for yourself based on some of the stuff I had to go through, then yeah, find me on Amazon. I look forward to connecting with any and everyone who wants to do this work in the state of Texas. I'm licensed in Texas, unfortunately.
Thank you. Thank you, Troy.
So you can find me if you look at my name on the screen. It says @exclusive5. That's my Instagram. That's the easiest way to do it. Just go follow me right now. Right? That's the easiest way. But I do have a website, exclusivethoughts.com. That's XKLUSIVE thoughts.com. And on there you can find me anywhere. And the last thing I would say is definitely would encourage you to go to Amazon and get a copy of the book. Teach you how to love, or what you don't know will hurt you. Always say, just go read the reviews. If you're nervous about it, go read the reviews, and it'll be a good purchase for you.
Excellent. Thank you for highlighting your expertise and experiences, for doing your part and changing the narrative. And lastly, for keeping your commitment by being a part of the show. That means a lot. If you've enjoyed the show, let us know. If you or someone you know is changing the narrative, please contact us at or on any of our social media platforms. We're here to share your story. For merchandise, visit iChangeTheNarrative.org. Thank you to our sponsors, So Organic, So Suave. You can follow Sauce on Instagram. For the latest in product news and updates, visit sossd.co. Don't forget to follow us on TikTok and IG, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at iChangeTheNarrative. That's all one word. We've added a weekday pop-up segment. We'll see you next time, same place, same great show, and more great conversation. Thank you all so much for listening.